the meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is we have the employee classification and compensation study with Lynn and Leah.
Thank you, Council. I just want to go out ahead and start by saying that we are here tonight to talk about the classification and compensation study. We are lucky enough tonight to have Leah Davis here from Abdo Solutions to walk us through the actual study. But I will go ahead and say that this was a citywide endeavor that we've been working on for quite a few months. It started out with a job evaluation questionnaire that every city employee was involved in. You know, they actually had to identify the important job duties, and basically we rewrote all of our job descriptions with the help of the Abdo employees. So that was just one part of it. The next part, Leah will go through every single piece of this classification and compensation study. It was a very timely process. It took many months to kind of fine-tune. More work went into it than I could have ever imagined, and they did do a fantastic job, but I will turn it over to Leah from Abdo.
All right, great, thank you. What I kind of wanted to go through today is just summarize. You'll have the report, correct? So hopefully you've had a chance to dig in and you kind of came with some questions. What I'll do though is kind of give you a high-level overview. Sometimes there's a lot of data in that report, so sometimes what's nice is to kind of just level set in terms of what it all means and what the findings were, so we're all starting from the same place, and then we can kind of dig into your questions, concerns, those types of things. So very high level, we'll just kind of go through the overview. It's nice to remind ourselves about the goals and underlying assumptions that we used as far as the study. We can revisit that process methodology that we talked about months ago when we met, and then we'll kind of go through findings and next steps and questions. So again, the work on the project was primarily done by myself and a manager on our team, Michael Mooney, and so I was very involved in the project. If you want to jump to the next slide. So again, just like Lynn said, this was a really involved process, and the city had a lot of legwork on the front end, particularly with the job descriptions to get that up and running. The job descriptions really form the foundation of the study, right? Because everything we do is based on good job matching, a very solid understanding of job duties. Assigning all the scoring for the positions is completely dependent on sort of those job description representations of each position. So that was a big lift. And then we went through, did the market study, the benefit analysis. We went into the comp and class development based on the feedback we were getting in terms of how's your current structure working. Is it not only compliant, but is it doing some of the operational things in practice that you needed to do? Recruit, retain, motivate, those types of things in practice. And then the last phase is if and when you adopt some version of the program, then we would make sure that internal staff are trained on how to roll it out, administer it, and have the tools to keep it current and valuable as you move forward. So that's sort of the yet to do phase. Okay, so again, this is a lot of these are just snips right from the report, but just important to kind of make sure we revisit sort of some of the goals and assumptions that we were focusing on as part of the study and that we really relied on in terms of building out the recommendations. We know you're motivated to attract and retain. We know that you're dealing with unique labor markets right now. As a growing city, that's a component that you need to keep in mind. And that we're seeing some compression and issues with tenured employees, not sort of moving through the range as you wanted them to. So that was important. Based on that initial meeting that we had with council, we understood that the city philosophy was to be sort of in line or just above market averages for min and max pay. And that you wanted to maintain that formalized pay structure. And as a public employer, you kind of have to, or pay equity becomes just a shot in the dark, kind of. But that you were open to looking at formalizing it maybe a little more than it has been. It's been an open range structure, and that if we could kind of figure out how to make it a little more structured, that might help solve some of the tenure progression issues within each grade. So looking at that. that you definitely want to make sure that you've got pay that's competitive to motivate performance and retention. It's also worth noting too that, especially in the development of the job descriptions, one of the things that we're always making sure cities are looking at is those requirements. Are those education requirements essential, or can some combination of skills and experience make up for that as well? And so we just want to make sure that whatever the education, skills, experience requirements, that those are reflected correctly and that we're capturing that in the compensation that's being recognized in compensation. And then last, but definitely not least, it's just really critical to remember that your union represented positions are included in the study, but they're not included in the recommendations for compensation adoption because they have to be negotiated independently. So historically, they've aligned with your existing structure, but that's never a guarantee when you have to go into bargaining. So they're in there, you know what it could look like if they were to adopt, but that doesn't happen immediately if you adopt it for everyone else. Again, because of the timing of the study, we don't have 2024 League of Minnesota City salary survey data yet, so we were relying on 2023 LMC data, which was then aged based on feedback from the cities in your cohort group that you selected. So we took the 23 data, applied the COLAs they provided us. And then some of the cities that didn't respond to the 2023 LMC data, we did direct surveys. And then we did pull benefit data via direct survey. We were matching similar job titles, and in some of the cases, the cities were helping us match it if we solicited from them. But we just know we're not setting job descriptions by job descriptions. It's usually your job description, which we knew very deep in a detailed way, with maybe a job summary for the other cities. So.
I have a question, Leah.
Yeah.
When you said the we doing the surveys, is it your team, Abdo, or was it a collaboration with the city staff?
We initiated it and led it, but there were some cases where we needed city staff help pulling if they weren't responding to us. So I know the city did help with a few stragglers. So, okay. So in general, comparable municipalities. So the city of Carver did have a good idea of who you wanted in your peer group, so we didn't do a ton of work on helping you develop that because you have a pretty structured, formal process for that. There were some updates to that though, based on the cohort group you'd been using in the past. So that was, you kind of had a refresh and a relook at that. But the primary criteria for that group then was really based on population, proximity to the metro, really looking at those operational areas departments represented, and then that 2023 city tax rate were the primary criteria you were using. And so you can see there the cities that were included in the study. Those with the double asterisks, those were cities that we had to expand your search for a little bit for just a handful of positions that we weren't getting enough comparables in your initial list. So, and the city of Victoria did not respond. So, despite requests. Okay, so key findings and considerations. So you have in Appendix A of your report very detailed position by position data, and we can kind of look through that. But in general, the city was actually very well positioned with the market. So just slightly above. I know the goal was to be maybe a little further above the market than where you landed. But you were within 1 to 3%, slightly above market averages for both the minimum and the maximum pay. So that really is an indication that you've done a good job as an organization, kind of keeping tabs and applying appropriate COLAs to your existing schedules. So you were pretty well positioned. So no huge changes or budget impacts, I guess, to get you caught back up necessarily. There are variances by positions, right? So those are averages again. So there are positions that are farther above or below the market for min and max. The important thing to remember on that though, again, is there may be legitimate reasons for that, right? Like you may have market data for similar positions, but maybe your position does have something that makes it a little unique and you're compensating for that. And so it's maybe farther above market, but as long as that's an intentional decision, there's nothing wrong with that. Then, so we use this data based on your compensation philosophy then to sort of roll into the recommendations for the non-union positions. So again, the structure you have in your report is for the non-union positions. In theory, the goal, I think, would be to negotiate your bargained employees onto something very similar to that, just for consistency and administrative purposes or reasons. But it would have develop a step-in grade. So right now you're in open range. The sort of idea is to go back to grades with steps. The steps, though, being awarded based on some of those performance milestones that you've seen, right? So not reverting all the way back to a entirely length of service-based step program, but having it be performance-based. Performance and development and achievement-based. The 8 steps then, assuming adequate performance, would put an employee at the top of the range, assuming they started at the first step within 7 years. There's 20 grade levels. So that helps with compression as you continue to grow. It spreads it out just a little bit so you have enough grades to encompass all the different positions. And at the 2024 levels and 25 levels, it would place you approximately 4.5% above market for that start step and 5.6% above market for that top step. Steps, then each of those milestone steps would be a 3% increase in pay. And then it's just important to note that milestone step would be in addition to any COLA that you might apply to the table, right? So in any given year, the COLA would move the whole table and everyone on it, and then they would be eligible for that milestone step if they're not already at the top step. And so here you can see cost of implementation. This is probably where I'd anticipate a lot of the discussion today, because it is where a lot of the discussion tends to happen. And so implementation does sort of happen in phases, and so you have some wiggle room and discretion with each of the phases as you're looking to roll them out. So that phase 1 is really to say, where are all our people being paid now? What is their current rate of pay? And if we adopted the proposed table, and this is just again for your non-union positions, if you adopted the proposed table and moved every employee to the step in their grade that's closest to their current rate of pay without going backwards, right? So right now they're all at some hourly rate. So what's the closest step in their assigned grade without going backwards? So that's sort of the moving into the house. So that's that 24,000, approximately 1.6% above your total gross payroll. Phase 2 is this 10-year adjustment, right? This where we've recognized we have tenured employees who maybe ought to be on the higher end of the range, but just haven't really progressed through the range like you wanted. So what this proposed phase 2 does is it moves most of those employees to a step that is closer to their sort of tenured position, if you think about years of service. And so it's actually a conservative proposed marketplace adjustment. If we did just say, you've been here 7 years, you should be on step 8, that's actually a $61,000 adjustment, which would be equivalent to 4%, but this basically was, let's get everyone within two steps of maybe what their proposed grade would be, so they kind of phase in over the next couple years. So that comes to that $17,200. And then also just considering, we proposed phase 3, and keep in mind this all sort of happens in the same moment, right? So you have some discretion within the phases, but they really all probably happen on January 1, aside from phase 4, which happens based on those milestone awards and when you're doing performance management. But 1, 2, and 3 kind of happen all at the same time. 2025 COLA assumes a 3% increase, 3% COLA. It was just a projected estimate. And again, that comes to 1.9% of your total annual gross payroll because we're not including your union positions in that COLA adjustment.
How many union positions do we have again?
Probably half of them, don't you think? 7.
12.
Okay.
Yeah.
And full-time, regular employees, non-union employees?
7. Yeah. We're gonna be adding our 13th union position with the new public services tech 2 spot that's hired in July.
Okay, so if we make an assumption that union goes along with these numbers,
I don't have any, frankly, indication that there's gonna be any conversation regarding this until the spring of 25
okay,
from the union.
okay. So, but you just said that we would be looking at this at January 1, 2025 for the non-union.
Non-union.
Okay,
So just to kind of like maybe combine Leah's comments with how this lines up with the 25 budget process, I would say probably at the end of the day, and I don't know if it's in the presentation, but you're more or less adopt the plan, the pay schedule, that structure. I think it's table 5 or 4.
Yeah, let me see here. If you go in your actual report, table 4 is the proposed structure.
What staff would owe to the council is how that integrates into the 2025 budget. So there's a bunch of different viewpoints on phasing. Leah is giving you an example. Based on the feedback that I got from the council, we would show you options for like the complete full milestone placement for the non-union, and then alternatives to that, but we'll start with the full milestone. And then the theory is that you look at the entire budget in totality and say, well, we can't afford this if we do that, and these 3 things. And so rather than looking at it just in a vacuum, saying we agree to this right now, we're suggesting that you look at it with the new debt you have for the fire station, street improvements, capital that you're planning, just inflation to operations, and then make a decision on implementation strategy in concert with the 2025 budget process. But in essence, what you'd be doing with the classification and compensation study is agreeing to the structure of how those changes would be made. The phasing comes during the budget process.
so then that would, okay, I just need one clarifier here.
Mm-hmm.
So are we looking to, through this budget process, do this for the non-union employees?
Right
But
now,
then-
you're only able to do it for the non-union
Okay.
employees. So
The union would be a lag time of a year behind?
don't really know. So the union agreement has a pay schedule, the open range, the minimum and max, and within the confines of that agreement specifies how the range is going to be adjusted. There's one data input, that Minneapolis Federal Reserve CPI calculator, and so the only way to increase that range is through that input that's memorialized in the contract, and then 2, the 5% increase that's memorialized in the contract, and they are under no obligations to change that. And so until that, frankly, is negotiated in a new contract, we frankly might not know their position until year end 25 with an implementation in 26. Now I would say like the hope without negotiating, like on a live stream would be that like we have similar, if not the same, pay structures, and we could negotiate an agreement where the pay structure is the same. There might be negotiation on how you get it, the milestones, if they want to do that, like the pros and cons of that. But easy for me to say, but I think the conversation, it really is like, this isn't a union issue at this point because they're under contract for the next, frankly, 18 months. And so we could speculate, but I think we're also at risk then of, if we start speculating numbers, we're at peril of negotiating against ourselves.
Okay.
So
Okay,
this is my opinion on that.
okay, thank you.
Good question. So outside of the cost of living adjustments, this program costs $68,000. If we didn't do this, what would we be spending a year? What are we spending a year to make adjustments in wages outside of that? Just however we're doing that, the methodology you use today.
So the methodology we use today is that single source input of that CPL calculator, and it's been a variety of, it's been all the way from like 0 to 1 to, I think 2 years ago was 8. What the new program suggests is you look at a variety of indicators for that, what that costs us.
It's not really $68,000 more. It's probably somewhere in between them, right? Because we've got an expense now.
Yeah, we were
We
planning
just
to have.
do it a different way.
Correct. Sure.
Yes.
So when we look at that number, it's really not that number.
Sure.
Okay.
And there are a bunch of, Lynn is kind of the expert in this area, but each frankly employee has a different kind of subset of the impact because, each employee's wages are split between funds, general water, sewer, and those are prorated differently depending upon the position. Where, your utility superintendent is going to be almost entirely water and sewer funds, where a building official is going to be all out of the general fund. And so there are a bunch of little pieces, and you can take these data points and kind of start to give yourself an idea. Lynn's got some good spreadsheets that when we get into the budget season, and we can get that out to you earlier, get into some real nitty gritty so you can get a good line of sight. I would offer that what Lee is presenting here is like a scenario.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
But it's not like the only way that you could do it.
No, and I'm not suggesting that we're a different way of doing it. I'm suggesting that the cost of this is not really $68,000 because we're spending money today just with a different methodology.
Yeah.
This is just structured differently.
Correct.
So we don't look at this and say an extra $68,000.
That's correct. Yeah, you've historically adopted COLAs. Phase 3 is a sort of, that cost would, in theory, be there whether you adopt or not, right? So there's a variety of things in play. You're 100% right.
And just one kind of follow-up to that is using the existing methodology for determining COLA in the union agreement. If that number comes up at, let's say, 10% in August, this would be theoretically more cost-effective because right now we're saying it's 3%, and through the adoption of this, the council would adopt that 3% for 25. No, at last check it was at 4%. And if anyone knows what inflation is going to be like in August, I'd love to talk to you. But ultimately, I think the root of this, the foundation of this issue for cost impact is rooted in the 2025 budget process and some numbers that Lynn can get to the council, but the methodology is fundamentally within the confines of this report that ABDO's creating, or has created.
Thanks, Eric, that's a good question. I wasn't thinking of that.
Yeah.
Well,
Good ones to look at.
So I think that sort of the next steps would be for the council at whatever time you want to formally accept the report, right? That's not to say you're adopting any of the recommendations, but just accepting the report, and that gives you sort of the ability to say, okay, we accept the data, and then you may want to go back and start doing some of the scenario work that Brent is talking about there, because that's entirely right. You have the ability to sort of look at this more closely and align it with your budget priorities, so. And then, as I said, once something is adopted, whatever that ends up being, then the last step in the project for our team would be to work with the internal city team and make sure they have what they need in terms of tools, training, resources to adopt, roll out, implement, and maintain the structure going forward. So.
Can you just, I think the point would be amplified if you can share maybe anecdotally, not all cities follow the COLA adjustments. And I've been part of a study where not here, but where they haven't adjusted COLA and all of a sudden they try to do 10 years of implementation once. Can you just, because sometimes
Yes.
That's not a very fun thing for the council to explain pay range, and an 8% increase isn't necessarily an 8% increase to staff, but if you don't do it and you do this, it's almost like a day of reckoning. Can you just touch on that?
And so I will say we're working with cities right now who didn't keep up during the last couple of years, and they kind of stuck to their 2% COLAs during years when the market was moving 4 to 6%. And I mean, they have a very, very different cost to implement, and they're seeing it in real life in terms of they can't recruit, they're having trouble retaining, people are topping out in their scale and can get very similar positions for far more pay. So that's a very difficult budget discussion if you kick the can. So because you would no longer be using the CPI as sort of and you could use that as your point of reference. I mean, candidly, it actually has positioned you relatively well and where you were hoping to be over the years. So that could guide your COLA discussions. But I would say that is the key maintenance item, is making sure that you really do have a finger on what are your cohort cities doing in terms of COLAs year over year.
Except for Victoria, I guess we don't compare ourselves to that.
So I sent the mayor of Victoria, because I was curious, an email, and she's gonna look into why it wasn't. She was supportive, she seemed supportive of sharing, so.
And I sent
It
a
is.
message too to our team just to kind of figure out who did we reach out to and what was I was not involved directly with the survey process, so.
Yeah, I'm not pointing fingers, I was just curious, I sent the email yesterday when I was
Yeah.
reading my packet, and maybe it's too late now, but maybe we'll.
And the other thing too is even though it's not in the report, if we get that data, we can include it for the rest of your analysis, right? It's not that we can't update and see if it even makes a meaningful difference in the data, but that's easy to do.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Before you go, Lee, just one more thing.
Yeah.
In the back of the report, there is a kind of a listing of positions.
Is it worth looking through that?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, and if you can add context, that would be helpful, Leah, but, it gives min and max for each position, and that doesn't mean that a specific position is underpaid. That's how that position looked compared to the market min and max.
Just the range.
But it doesn't look at where that person might be on the range, or am I saying that
That's
correctly?
100% correct. So yes, the survey data was not looking at any individual people. It was looking at city established ranges, min and max, and we were comparing that to the city of Carver's established ranges, not individual people or within the organization. So when we did look at sort of in the cost to implement analysis, where is each individual employee, and do they have catch-ups to get in with the range movement? The nice thing is it did, again, off the top of my head, but I don't believe you had any individual employees that were paid below the proposed ranges, for example, right? That they're somewhere in the middle there, and when your range moves to that desired market position, I don't believe there was any significant catch-up for any individual employees, which is good.
And I would offer them, we talked about this with that model pay plan or pay for performance plan is the biggest issue I think the city has is the compression of the tenured employees, because the gap becomes so much bigger between like the next tier size city, and the implementation needs to be budget conscious. But I would say that the longer that goes on, the more at risk you are of losing your most tenured employees, or at least seasoned, because of that budget gap. And so just understanding that context, I think, might be helpful as we go forward. Anything I'm missing on that?
No, but I think it is worth sort of noting when you talk about that compression, the tenured employees not necessarily moving through your established ranges. When we looked at that first phase of implementation where it just puts everyone on the closest step based on their current pay without going backwards, so you didn't have anyone in the organization above a step 5. So I think that sort of, is concrete data that, as an organization, while you were maybe the ranges were within the market, they weren't moving through the range effectively, because even your very tenured, you had nobody on step 8 in the organization. So, so this, I think, this maybe tweak to your current model where you're saying we're going to add back the steps, they'll be based on these milestones and these key development and expectations. I think that's going to be a good balance for you where it gives people a chance to move, but that it also has a performance component that is important to you.
Who's our most tenured, Paul? And then
Me.
you, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy was here.
Kathy's retiring and
No, I realize that.
Yeah.
But as of right now, she.
Paul, Kathy, me, Vicki,
Okay.
Aaron.
Okay.
Wow.
And nobody's reaching.
Yeah.
All the important.
Wow. Yeah, so no one in that phase 1 was placed higher than a step 5.
And this for like historical context, prior to 2013, that's the model that the city uses, STEP and COLA, except there wasn't any performance metrics. In 2013, we moved to the open range that just adjusted the entire scale, and that's kind of, even though that had some benefits, that was the first step in kind of rooting people kind of below the mid-range point.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leah.
Yes. We'll hand it back over to Courtney now.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for covering for me. Apologies, I don't know if you guys were here, I had to take a phone call that I wasn't quite anticipating would come in at 5:28, but here we are. Okay, 2024 community survey and follow-up discussion.
So thank you, Mayor and Council. In your packet, you have a whole host of information related to the 2024 community survey. The council received a presentation from Peter Leatherman during your May 6th meeting and asked for an opportunity at an upcoming work session to have a discussion. So I also included your strategic plan. Kind of give you some discussion seeds, if you will, where you could review the strategic plan or any like survey pieces that you found interesting and that you maybe wanted to send some direction to staff on doing some additional work and strategy initiatives related to that. Also planted some seeds related to looking at the strategic plan, and I had a conversation with the mayor about this earlier today. You know, sometimes when you have all this energy around a strategic plan and you do the updates and then you kind of really dial in like a year later and then you're like, well, what were we hoping to get out of that? And sometimes that's like a number one sign that like maybe that was just like a moment in time. So I put that related to the public safety service plan. You know, do we do something like that? And if we do, like, what are some more ingredients that we'd want to give to the team as far as like what that looks like? The same goes for communication, just based on the feedback from the survey for communication and public safety. Do we want to narrow in? Do we want to pitch some of these and refine? And then, as you know, there's a whole host of questions, issues, and topics within the survey. So with that, I'll throw it over to the mayor to kind of lead the discussion.
Yeah, so I think if you guys are okay with it, I'd just like to go through in the recommendation section the questions that Brent asks. So 1 and 2 may be able to be lumped together, but the conversation that Brent and I had this morning, like he said, public safety service plan. I remember really liking the strategic plan when we were done with it, but now, almost 18 months later, I'm like, what was a public safety service plan? And to the kind of proof that Brent put in here with 94% of our respondents of our community survey saying that our police and fire protection were either excellent or good, I'm not sure what we're missing. Add that into the cost of putting whatever this what is together would be significant and would require an outside consultant. I'm not seeing the need for it.
So I agree. One of the things that we had difficulty with, and I talked to Brent about this earlier, was just the relationship with the sheriff's department. And I think we've made great strides there, and certainly Brent has in his relationship. We didn't have the sharing with the city of Victoria then. I think we have more robust coverage than we have. So, and it was a bit of an eye opener. You know, you assume you need to really drill down into something, but the perception is, based on the reports that we saw and the type of calls that are being made, that we're doing a pretty good job. So I agree with the recommendation that we don't need to have a third party examine what we could do better.
To get that extra 6%.
Reed, what are your thoughts?
No, yeah, I definitely don't feel it's worth having an outside expert come in and advise when it's got such good ratings, right? I actually wasn't part of the strategic plan, so I can look at the outside.
Yeah, you're in a little bit of a.
Yeah, no, was it more in terms of like staffing, or was it more, you think, in terms of like, were we like, how many fire trucks do we need, or were we thinking more in terms of police coverage and?
I think Eric hit it, it was coverage at the
Okay.
time and it was relationship building at the
Relationship,
time.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, then, I don't think we need to hire an outside consultant for.
Lori, Christine, any thoughts?
No, also because, like, as far as service deficiency, I don't think that's an issue. Where that is like in the recommendations what they're trying to solve for us. But I was actually also thinking that we seem to be able to know what the community's thinking, and we seem to be able to listen and evaluate it and then maybe make a change or not. Because I was thinking about the speed limit signs, some places asking for a lower, the 20, 25. But, so I would support not moving forward with this public safety, just because we're dealing with things as they come to us.
Christine?
Agree across the board here that we don't need that. I think listening to the residents here, right? This is their feedback, and we seem to be sitting in a good spot in their eyes. And besides that, I don't see that we need it. Again, times have changed since we did the strategic plan, so I think we're good.
Okay. Moving on to number 2, scope of strategic initiatives. The strategic plan has communication strategy, community engagement strategy, and stakeholder satisfaction program in there as well. All of which, for the most part, we would probably need somebody to come on board, a consultant, to help with those. I remember communications strategy, and I still think that that's a priority, but I don't think that it needs to be capital S strategy document. In my mind, I think that this is something that we're all out of town and tornado hits the city, and Brent and Nick are the only ones who are able to make it to City Hall. And Brent hikes the proverbial binder to Nick, and Nick is able to follow through and say, this is the email distribution list for a press release, this is what we do, and kind of run through. I think just having a list of kind of communications touch points, probably passwords for social media accounts, that kind of thing. I think you all know my bias in that thinking that communications is super, super, super important. We did rate really well on that, but I think we have to keep that super high level of service, especially without having a hyper-local newspaper right now. So, as far as the other 2 things that are on there, community engagement strategy and stakeholder satisfaction program, I'll admit I'm struggling a little bit to remember what we were thinking 18 months ago when we put that in. But I also feel like I'm also not talking to Brent about like, where is that stakeholder satisfaction program? So I don't feel like it's anything that we're missing. So I would say narrowed and targeted strategy on communications, yes, something that we can do in-house, and no to the other 2.
I agree. I think in-house is great examples of saying if something happens, there's a guideline so they know what the steps are to take care of it in, let's say, a disaster. Yeah. And if the tornado hits and I can't make the City Hall, I guess I'm blown away. But no, I agree. I think we should keep it in-house.
You're out of town that weekend.
Yeah.
You don't blow away. Okay, cool.
Same thoughts, yeah.
So for communication, we talked a lot about meeting the citizens where they are, the technology for that. And we're doing a good job. I don't know that maybe it's a good idea to have somebody who that is their profession take a look at that with us. And I say that coming out of some meetings with Southwest Transit, bringing a new marketing person on, and kind of the revelations that were made in Southwest Transit about mistakes in marketing and what could be done better. But it took an outside person looking in to make the recommendation. So
As a consultant or as like a full staff?
at first it was a consultant, then they hired a new staff person.
Okay.
Yeah, as a result of that. So, for us, I'm not saying that we have the budget for a full staff person, but maybe we direct some money to a consultant to look at that.
Yeah, I don't, for the staff, for sure, for a town of our size, I don't think of all the needs that we have, that the communication, like bringing a full-time staff on would be.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that.
Right, would be it. I could be swayed depending on what that looks like for a consultant, like what are they doing for us? Are they coming in once a week? Are they just doing an overhaul and looking at what we have and giving some suggestions?
Or how we best utilize the tools we have, because we have new tools. We have a new billing platform, we have new technology, and
Maybe at least in the paper, that might not be a bad idea of how we could maintain, right?
I think you'd be shocked. I think you'd have a little bit of sticker shock at how much it would cost to have.
Okay.
a
And
consultant.
maybe-
Maybe
Okay.
you know from your experience with Southwest Transit, but I worry about having them come in and say, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. And then Brent saying, that's great, I've got a full-time job and a part-time job and a part-time job on
Sure,
top of
sure.
that. What if we can't execute on that? We wouldn't have the staff support in terms of a communicator to do that. And we're not looking to hire a communicator.
Yeah.
I understand that. I also worry that maybe there are simple plugins for the technology we have that we don't know that those simple things could, have a meaningful impact in what people see and how they see it, or, vision into their billing or what the city is doing and how we communicate. I don't know, but as an area of improvement, maybe that's a future discussion. Regarding the nuclear football, I didn't know that we had the binder.
Communications binder. It's mostly in my mind. Nobody prints anything these days.
Okay.
We do have I would say like a 3 to 5 page document on communication strategies. Essentially was built for the flood events, so.
So we have that, and whose charge is that? That's you, and then you, what's the order?
The succession plan?
Yeah. Well, I never thought about what we have, but let's say there is a big disaster event.
Well, that's a different issue. I think we have
Okay.
a disaster response, right?
Yeah, we're working currently on a kind of a localized emergency response plan, so I would say like most of the things that you are talking about would be covered in that, and then there would be a football, so to speak,
Okay.
for a sports ball.
Thank you.
All right, I didn't mean to deviate, I'm sorry, just since it was
And we
talked
could
about.
certainly, if the council is supportive of it, like, get a couple of proposals on, this is probably like a more elegant way to say this, but like a communications audit, and have someone come in and say, look at all of our communications and like review and provide suggestions, and you could say, oh, I'm interested in that, or no, that's not what we need and way too expensive, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't hate the idea, I just don't think we're there yet. And I'm struggling a little bit with what are we trying to solve, because the survey came back so positive from residents as far as our Facebook page, our newsletter, and the communications that we're doing.
I wonder if that changes now though with the Herald. We've just barely had the Herald go
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And so are we gonna start to hear, I didn't know, where is this information? Because now the Herald, it's been gone really briefly, but is that going to leave a gap that we're not even seeing
Something
yet?
I'm thinking.
That's-
Yeah, Yeah, that's a good point. And if somebody has experience in a community where the newspaper's gone away and can help with strategies to
Yeah.
leave when they go away.
I mean, I thought of it yesterday, but I was like, oh, I wonder if, never mind, the Herald won't have it.
The fear I have is the vacuum that creates, you know, I don't want that to be filled by rampant Facebook.
I was talking to Brent tonight, and I think in this document that we create, the 2-page document, we sit, you know, it includes things like the meeting rundowns and agendas and newsletters are always sent to the Patriot. That said, I think it's gonna take some almost retraining of getting our folks to know to go there, to get their information, but,
To the Patriot, which they have to pay for.
they had to pay for the Herald too.
It was
Not the print.
free
You
The
can
last
find
couple
it.
years they
Yeah.
had to.
You
It
can
was a
find it
donation.
anywhere, so. I'm not, you know, I kinda think, Eric, what you brought up is making more sense to have something small. I don't want this huge to do, but I wouldn't mind somebody taking a look and doing an audit, especially since we just lost the Herald and saying, okay, how do we transition through this? We're gonna have a gap here, and what does that look like for us? Where do we fill it?
I don't hate that. So I think we're, can somebody else say differently so that I can like it?
All right. Okay.
Too soon?
What I'm shooting for, don't eat.
Okay, I think we're,
Yeah, no,
are we all in the same place though? So we talked a lot about communications. The other items in here were community engagement strategy and stakeholder satisfaction strategy. I'm thumbs down on both of those.
Yeah, I think the community survey covered
yeah.
things that we're looking for from those exact things, so I'm good with that.
I'm not
I'm
hearing
good.
anybody advocate
Yeah,
for
no,
it.
no.
Okay. Okay, clear on the direction for those two. Okay, and then based on survey results and additional discussions, staff is looking for direction on what other budget initiatives, policy initiatives, or modifications we would like to see in the strategic plan. I don't have any.
Chrissy? Sure, I'll bring it up. So, when we talked about, or when we had the questions about the speed limit and what that looked like, I was surprised that some of the ones who said, I have to look back at that, where that is in the study, but it wasn't a huge amount of people that had, wanted it to be changed, but to me, there was kind of enough. And something was just rolling through my head about this, and what if, and this was just me trying to solve it in my head, as I'm thinking, we have our collector roads that have different speed limits, right? You've got 40 miles an hour, you've got 30 through 4th Street up as you go through here. That doesn't bother me. The collectors are meant to do that, to carry cars at a higher rate of speed, to move people through to larger transportation channels. When I think about when I'm walking down the sidewalk or when I'm driving somewhere, does 30 miles an hour on some of these side residential streets feel too fast? And I have to say, yes, it does to me. Now that's a feel thing, right? It feels too fast to me. I certainly would never advocate to slow down some of our collector roads, but maybe there is something behind looking into what our side street speed limits are. And we don't have to go as far as some of the really creative ones I've seen where they put 17 miles an hour on there because it gets people's attention. Have you ever seen those? They're kind of funny to me. But I don't know, to me, it's something worth at least having another discussion about with council about what we may think about that.
Yeah, that surprised me how many people supported it, even when we asked it.
Sure.
Yeah,
If
even
you
when
pay for it.
Right, even when you asked, there was still over 50% like using city funds, so that kind of, I don't know how much city funds are thinking, but I mean, it did have more support than I initially thought it would.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
Yeah.
So I rewatched the last meeting because I remember that Peter said something really interesting, and he said, well, 55% support the use of city funds. That's only conceptually.
Sure.
And he said, we know people's opinions on funding will be based on how much it costs them.
Mhm.
So then he was quick to point out that 55% is the ceiling of support. And he said, perception versus reality. So perception of, yes, I love that idea in concept, and then reality when it hits your pocketbook. And then he used the example of the work that he does with school districts and referendums, saying, do you support a new high school? Do you support a new pool? And everybody's like, yes, anything for the kids.
Yeah.
And they're like, how about if it costs you $500 a year? And they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. So I think that that was just a really good way, in my mind, to understand it. What did he also said? He said, he pointed out intensity, that only 25% of the respondents feel strongly about it one way or the other.
So we have, I'm just gonna rebuttal her really quick. So we have, when I'm looking at the numbers, so changing it, reducing the speed to 25 is, we've got strongly support, and unsure. For me, I can put unsure can move back and forth in there because they don't have, maybe they just don't have enough information on it. When I'm looking at supporting funding, there's yes and there's unsure, which then you're looking at what, 62%. So I agree that when the real numbers were to come in, that could definitely change for people. I don't know what that real number is, to say if we're gonna change out speed limit signs in the residential streets, what is that? Is that $5,000? Is that $25,000? Is it $50,000?
I'm confused about that. I mean, they're vinyl overlays to the existing signs. Kind of like we're doing with the, the conservation areas. It's a vinyl overlay. It can't be $25,000.
I don't think we can use vinyl overlays for that, but I can certainly get a cost from public services and engineering on cost per sign and the number of speed signs that we have that would be impacted.
I'm just surprised that would be cost prohibitive.
I would
There's a lot of
warn
speed.
us to not think of that as the only cost.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
no.
I think if we're
Same
looking at it,
enforcement.
there should be a marketing campaign of 20 is plenty, whatever, and I think we need to do some marketing on this to get folks to know, so that I didn't know isn't a good excuse when you get pulled over. And then I also think that extra enforcement should be budgeted in there as well, because, so I think I've shared this with this group before, maybe before your time, but I have talked to the sheriff about this. I've talked to Carver County deputies, and they were both like, no, this isn't the silver bullet of stopping speeding. I have talked to the mayor of Victoria, who has a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, like what you're advocating for on residential streets, and she says we still hear the annual complaints of folks complaining about speeding. So I appreciate being reactive, but if we look at really like what we are trying to accomplish, or getting people to try to drive slower on our residential streets, I do not believe that this will affect the change that we're looking for.
Was there a suggestion out of that what works, like the notification signs that tell
Yeah.
you how fast you're going? Because
When I spoke to the sheriff, that was
Yeah.
one of the things that he said. I think additional, he said writing tickets. He said we could go to a zero tolerance. He goes, people hate it because did you drive 31 going down the hill on your way here? But we could start doing a zero tolerance and tickets to all who go 31 miles an hour or more. But he said that that was an option of doing things differently. I think it's a combination of enforcement, which is tough because of the struggles with the staffing for the sheriff's department. And then he also said that those monitor signs.
we've talked about that. I think active awareness versus passive, which is the sign, makes a difference.
Yeah.
And we had a discussion about cost of doing that. I don't remember where that landed. That was probably 8 months ago.
Yeah, we have signs that will go up this year on Spring Creek Drive and Ironwood Drive.
Okay.
And then 2 signs will go in with the 4th Street project on 4th Street West, going eastbound and westbound.
Okay.
So
I have a little bit of an opposite. I mean, if you do nothing, then nothing can change either, right?
Sure.
So,
Yes.
So if it is 25, if you're going 35, that would probably trigger a ticket if a cop was passing you, right? Or somewhere around that range.
Pass the cop.
Yeah, if you're going 30 though, and you're going 5, chances are they're probably gonna leave that 5 mph, leeway alone. So is it possible then that we actually would be enforcing more tickets if we had the lower speed limit, because there's a bigger gap then as they're getting.
Maybe we need to have this sure.
Yeah. I mean, see,
Yeah.
I do understand what you're saying, where they have said there's nothing magic about this, right? It doesn't just, everybody now follows the speed limit and it stops. But is there something that we can do to do something?
I'm surprised it doesn't statistically slow it down, because people tend to think, well, okay, if I go 5 miles an hour over, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going 5 miles an hour over 25, well, then you got to where you wanted you to actually be slower.
Only my hypothesis, but it's probably the muscle memory. Here in Minnesota, it's 30. It's 30, it's 30. In Wisconsin, it's 25. So for me, I agree. I think 30 seems fast. And boy, I'm not going to be the one who gets pulled over in the city of Carver. So I've gotten passed on 6th Street for going 27 going up that hill, I get it, but I think.
And when it comes to the marketing campaigns, when we have changes or things that we do now, staff puts it on Facebook, it goes in your newsletters. I mean, we don't have a paper, Chaska Herald can't put a big sign that's front page, City of Carver, look out, they just lowered the speed limits to 18 and a half, so.
I think we might need to do things like, I know Victoria uses yard signs, which is crossing into another issue. But I think I'm thinking more residential yard signs. I'm also thinking kind of the easel signs that we use for hydrant flushing. That we use for hydrant flushing. I think that, again, like any message we need to get out is now just a little bit harder without the Chaska Herald in there. So I think we've got to think a little bit more creatively when we're trying to.
Yeah, I think I'd jump right. If we're gonna spend money and switch the signs but not spend money on enforcement, then I think it's probably better to not spend the money, get the flashy, like the speed limit, right? Right, so I think if we change the speed limit and then don't do the enforcement, then that seems like not well spent
When you
versus.
say enforcement, do you mean the sheriff's office or having more of
Both.
the flashing signs?
Sheriff's office, right?
Yeah, I guess for me still, without knowing what it might cost, I have no idea whether it's even something that would be feasible to keep talking about. So is the council fine to hear the numbers of we've had this many signs and Brent can multiply it times whatever a sign is?
I would like that.
Or Lynn can.
It'll only be $33.
And 33 cents.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing an actual number of physical cost for the sign, and then I don't know how we estimate enforcement, but at least something to.
At least when the
Compare,
concrete part,
yeah.
then we know, at least
Right.
for the concrete part of like, this is what a sign will cost us.
When you likely, just based on sheriff's office communications, you're probably not in a position where you can like buy extra coverage unless you're buying the whole full-time
Sure.
deputy, so.
Gotcha. Okay.
Our hiring plan does call for adding another deputy, so that'd be the seventh deputy to the pool of 6 that we're sharing with Victoria, but there aren't a lot of opportunities that I'm aware of throughout the county where you could
There's actually
basically
stuff.
buy up like an extra 80 hours during the first month. I'm sure, if the council would choose to move forward, you could like make it like a priority, for like education, enforcement, phasing. In my mind, if you chose to do this after that, we'd maybe lay out a process similar to the franchise fee thing where you did some communications on like getting like a listening session and that sort of thing.
What if, I'm sorry to interrupt, but hear me out, and this seems a little extreme, but what if this summer we did a 0 tolerance summer and asked our law enforcement partners to ticket anything that's 31 or more?
I could support that. I'd say, I feel like we're looking at an option of, bringing down the speed limit, making it a stricter rule for a select few that aren't already obeying the 30. And this is just, this is a, more of like a behavior modification issue, like, instead of what is that right number to put on that sign?
I don't think you.
I think then it gives some consequences for.
And maybe this is the pilot, and we do it June, July, and August. I think, I know we've never taken an approach of telling our deputies what to do.
Right,
I don't know how well that will be received. I know that I can't imagine it being received well by Steve, who's going 31 down a hill.
and maybe it's not a no tolerance, maybe it's something of.
No, I think it's gotta be,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
gotta have teeth. I
Okay.
think it's gotta have.
I'm not okay at 31,
Yeah.
that's a
I'm
barely
okay
like
at
a oops,
You're in the variance of the vehicle there, you're in the variance of
Yeah,
tire
or just-
sizes there.
yeah,
Someone who's, really,
yeah.
Yeah,
someone
true.
who says, I mean, their speedometer could say 29, or they're just a little over. I think 35, you know you're going too fast. 31, everyone, I mean, you're looking at your speedometer not out the window then.
Or I think too, then if we just ask them as partners, like, what do they recommend? Like,
Yeah.
you know, what, is there a range that in their mind? So, because I grew up with, and this is when you're going 65 on the appropriate road, like an expressway.
Because we know you don't speed, we get what you're
Yes,
getting at.
yes. So it was always 8 you're great and 9 you're mine. So I could go 73 and my dad wouldn't flip out. So, but obviously we're not looking at that. And the other interesting thing is the state has 10 miles per hour for alleys. I don't know if we enforce that.
I just see I think going into the summer season, when did we
Yeah.
hear all the speeding complaints?
Yeah.
It was last summer. I don't really think we heard anything
Yeah.
in the fall
And
and
they
certainly
agree too, like
zero.
it goes up in the summer.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is we are all outside more often in the summer, and I
Sure.
think I can't tell you how fast a car is going, but what I can tell you is when I am standing still, it seems like every car is going pretty fast, and that's a law of physics, right? So it could be 20, it could be 25, it could be 31, and it all seems like it's fast. I just feel like I don't want us to miss an opportunity to do something sooner rather than later that would be low cost and high impact.
Well, I can support a zero tolerance, but for me, the number's 35, because you know you're speeding at that
And-
speed.
I don't know how prescriptive we'd be able to be with our law enforcement partners. Maybe it's something we work together
Okay.
with them on. Because you've got more experience with this, of us not being able to really say.
Yeah. I'll check in with Commander Wolene. Because I think it might be difficult to say, like, well, use your best judgment, but then give them a ticket, like, and frankly, most of them are probably gonna be on the roads that you're not interested in. At this point, like Jonathan and Carver Parkway,
Yeah,
I
that's a
mean,
good point. They're not really-
I would just say, like, the data would suggest that the times where you actually are driving a residential street and drive by a sheriff's deputy are pretty infrequent, depending upon where you live. So, I mean, what we could do is just, it sounds like we could get you information on the signs and maybe bring out Commander Wolene and just have you ask him some questions first.
Yeah, maybe
I think that would,
Yeah.
that might be a good idea.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Right. We're talking about other results. Anything else that's on anybody's mind?
I just want to give the staff kudos on anyone who had an interaction with the staff, give them very high ratings. So that was very good to see. So, I mean, 94, 96, 92, so
Yeah.
good job, everyone.
So any direction on budget initiatives, policy initiatives, or modifications on the strategic plan?
I don't have anything else.
Laura?
Really just, and it falls into that communication. I was surprised that some of the things about the stormwater runoff and drainage seem to not be as positive. And maybe if we just communicate more that we have a plan. Because I think they've gone into like each pond, whatever time of year, there's just like, eventually everything gets touched as far as drainage. But maybe just kind of up the communication on what our plan is. Same with,
Yeah, and I would say yes, and I'm not exactly sure what, like, the drainage, I don't know, I don't think
we maybe
know.
not have the plan
I
done.
don't think we know what the drainage concern is, like, if it's just
Oh.
that they've got water in their backyard from their neighbor,
Yeah.
or is it a communication? Because frankly, there isn't a lot of like touch points with like storm pond maintenance. And usually if it is negative, we hear about it right away, so it's just a perspective, but my perspective was, it was just like, I've got water in a spot that I don't want to, and it wasn't necessarily communication, but again, I don't have any data to like back that up. I think if when we do the community survey again, I guess I would advocate for Peter and the council to look at like adding some more detail to like what that means when you have like a drainage. I'm like totally like jinxing myself here, but I can't remember the last time someone called me and said, I've got a drainage concern that I need the city to like fix.
Yeah. I was thinking more it's like.
Everybody calling now.
Yeah,
Let
where
us
they
know
feel like
when you
it's
get
being
7 calls.
ignored, or like, why is this
Right.
never
There's
maintained,
maybe
or
like
there's not.
one a year, and oftentimes it's not a city issue, it's like property owner to property owner, and maybe that's some of the frustration. But, you know, I think we had, like, between the Bolton and Mink team and the public services team, like, when we get those issues and we can do something about it, like we've replaced curb sections and.
So I'm not saying that we're doing
No, I'm
a
just-
bad job,
right.
it's just that, just to look at what was the low things, and that we can't pinpoint it.
Right.
And say it was because.
I don't
Yeah.
believe that, I don't have any data that suggests that like the drainage issue is a communication issue. That's what
Okay.
I guess, long story short, responding to is that it's not that we're mowing a pond and people are upset about that. Because I think we're doing a lot for that. I don't think we have the bandwidth to, if we're gonna mow a stormwater pond, notify like all the property owners. And I
No,
know
but
you're
just
not
more like
suggesting that.
at a high level that there was talk about, we have a plan on when each area is maintained, and just communicate that. We'll be in this neighborhood, this month of this year, and then next year of this month, just like, we're not forgetting about these things. That
Right.
They do each get touched eventually.
We can do that. We'd have to change our approach on
Okay.
things.
That's
because-
why you hire a communicator.
Because I'll give you an
One thing I
example.
don't want to see is another MS4 presentation.
You have to see.
Another
it.
one, I said, not another one.
The-
Not an additional one, like, that's not gonna solve it.
I'll get there's a
Just the one.
perfect example of like street sweeping. We went from, we used to do it almost like on a street by street basis, or like a certain neighborhood. And then we started getting feedback, like you said the street sweeper was gonna be here Wednesday or
Like
or
the
Thursday.
evil man.
But as you know, like things can happen in public services. And what it ended up being where it looked like we weren't following through. And so now we say we're gonna do it north of Community Park and south of Community Park. Just because we just don't have that ability with our size of staff and our like available resources to get, like we're gonna be in this neighborhood because something might come up that has a greater priority. So we could talk a lot about not over promising and under delivering. So that's like, I totally agree with like the concept, but that's maybe why you're feeling a little bit of like uncertainty, because I don't know if we can deliver on that of like, we're gonna be mowing your pond in the next like month, when we might have 3 or 4 more outreaches to clarify, like, well, it's probably not gonna be this month because it rained a lot, and now, so I don't think we have the ability at this point in our organization's history to be like that high touch and still do all the other things you want us to do.
Until we hire a communicator.
I don't know if
As
that,
much as that day comes.
I don't know if that comes, I think it's a very, there's a whole kind of like series, like some communities are out there saying like, the snow plows are out and we're gonna hit, this cul-de-sac, and some fire departments say there is a crash at, this intersection. I think you could eventually get there, but like your available resources for personnel and technology have to be far more robust So we try, like, it's not that we don't wanna communicate those items though, but, 10, 15 years ago, we were in this habit of like notifying people when there was a severe storm warning. Well, there's already things that do that. And what happens if the person who does the Facebook is in Lester Prairie,
Yeah.
there's no storm there, so it creates all these unintended consequences, or can create those.
Sounds good.
I just had one topic on the prime.
So did I.
Yeah, the prime ride thing. So is this kind of where we maybe talk about that a little bit before the budget? So the 43% is not hugely overwhelmed, but it's not super negative in my opinion, right? I mean, it seems like it's in the still the awesome category. It didn't give me a good answer either way. So page
40.
yeah,
Or 41.
So
Reed, so this came about, was this before you were on?
This
Right.
was December of 2022.
yeah,
January.
I heard a little bit in the background, but not the full. Oh, go ahead.
So
We're currently paying $12, right?
we pay,
Okay.
a rider pays $5. The city pays $12 for every
Right.
The
single
taxpayers pay.
Yeah.
Right. So we learned in December of 2022 that the price for a prime ride was gonna go up from $4 rider, $10 to the city, to $5.12.
Okay.
That was in December of 2022. You know our budget cycle well enough to know that we can't bob and weave
Yep.
in December
For the
after we
budget
set the
already, yeah.
preliminary levy. That was a huge bummer. With that, we decided to skinny the prime
Okay.
services that we participate in. So we cut Airport Prime and we cut Prime Edge, which is service to
Mystic Lake.
Scott County,
Okay.
to Dunwoody? What's the?
Normandale.
Normandale,
Okay.
to Edina, to Mall of
Sure.
America.
Okay.
The
Kept it
thought,
smaller.
and reel me in if I'm
Okay.
wrong, but the thought that we made for me, that decision was based on needs versus wants.
Yep. Okay.
Transportation. So, I felt like somebody who needs a ride to get somewhere, to use Prime MD
Yeah.
or kind of regular Prime,
Right.
to get to the grocery store, to get to the doctor, et cetera. I'm fine with
Paying-
using
yeah,
city funds
okay.
for that, but I don't think it's the city's role to subsidize your vacation
No,
to get you
sure.
to the airport.
Or go shopping at the mall, right?
That was,
Is there-
feel very strongly about this, so I was a huge advocate for cutting that service for exactly the reasons Cory just said. I want to be able to, as a community, help people get to the grocery store, pick up their prescriptions, go to their doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
I can't support the taxpayers of this community paying for people who can afford to get on an airplane and go on a vacation. That should not be something the
Subsidize.
taxpayers are subsidizing for people's generally vacations that they're heading to the airport.
One
Sure.
important
Okay.
difference also, Carver's not part of the Southwest Transit taxation district.
That's
So people compare us, and I just saw some Facebook posts, to Chaska, Eden Prairie. Everybody in those cities has a line item in their taxes that pays for Southwest Transit. We do not. That's why we have to subsidize
That's
the
why it shows
cost
up
of the
in our
ride.
budget more directly.
Right, so
Okay.
if you live in Chaska, you can take it to the airport 5 days a week. It doesn't cost Chaska anything additional.
Or to Mystic Lake.
Or to Mystic Lake.
Okay.
That's, and,
Gotcha.
yeah, there are other things there, but that's why.
I have the most
Okay.
recent data, the monthly report that's in your packet tonight
Oh,
is
okay.
flashed up on the screen, so you can see some of the trends for riders.
February. Does that answer your questions? Is that where you're?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Did you wanna bring up something about this?
But I was actually just going to mention that we've recently heard some more about this, and, some of the undertows, we've had some communication to the city about this. When I'm looking at the survey that we just did, once you look at people like, hey, how about Southwest Prime? Support was like 56%, yes, great. Then we said, do you realize your taxpayer, Joe taxpayer, pays for $12 of this? And then,
For my ride. Or
Yeah,
for your
for
ride.
that other guy's ride.
yeah, so then you see that number of support shrinks. by another 10%. And then then the unsure grew also. So I think a lot of people don't realize, they just think, oh, I just paid, this is my taxi cab ride, I just paid $5, whatever it is now. And then once you start talking about, oh, wait a minute, it's actually coming out of our own pockets, then they realize it's a little different.
So a future discussion someday is going to be, do we become part of that taxation district? Do we want to expand public transit? More large buses to Carver, more Prime to Carver. That's a big discussion. What we're doing, to make those decisions is learning about where the new tax dollars are going. We had a sales tax increase, where is that going? So that's the current discussion, and maybe we find out that there is some money that we can use for that, but that's not this week.
Okay. Yeah, I think that covers my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, or we're ready to move on? Okay. City manager's report, you have 5 minutes?
Yep.
That works?
You only have a 5-minute report?
Wow.
I know. You need it, actually, it's 4 minutes now.
I can run fast.
Oh, wait a
Maybe
minute.
you can.
Wrong one. Probably 3 minutes.
Now.
Oh, nah.
Just burning time.
These are all pretty simple, so.
Which means y'all can't ask questions.
There we go. So just reminding you that seasonal hours start the Tuesday after Memorial Day. Part-time administrative assistant, so this is, if you remember, we had a full-time position, Diane Schwalbe formerly had that, took another position, and we never backfilled that with a full-time or a part-time, but we allocated dollars in the 2024 budget for that, so we've reached a point where we feel like there is a need there and a defined need, so we've started soliciting applications for that position. So Brenda Good is leading that. The council budgeted for an additional public services technician starting in July. So applications for that position close this Friday. So we have a pretty decent number of applicants. So Eric Menth, Paul Schultz, Eric Madigan, and myself are going to be participating in the interview process for that. Lynn has led a process for, I know it's hard to say, but a replacement for Kathy's position, who's retiring in July. So he is starting June 17th. Can we say his name yet?
Yeah, his name's Seth Hardell. He is a recent graduate of Gustavus Adolphus, and he has some auditing background, so.
Cool.
Good.
So we have some overlap time. Do we budget for this overlap time? Okay.
It's actually only about a month that we started with, at one point, like 3 months worth, so.
Yeah, we debated that.
Yes, I remember having a span, but I couldn't remember what we landed on.
The 10-year long-term financial plan update is approaching, so Lynn's gonna be doing a kickoff for that, so think about all those kind of pots of conversations related to hiring, infrastructure, facilities, equipment, so we'll just be introducing that plan. Basically, we're affirming the existing plan and then adding the 2034 plan year, so a lot less of a heavy lift than it was last year, going from 5 to 10 years. And then Lynn's also going to be doing the 2025 budget kickoff, so just kind of giving you a line of sight to that. Am I good on time? Good. Then another minor item you might have noticed for quite some time, 2 of the light fixtures in the stair tower are out, and we've been having trouble with them frankly for quite some time, so we're working with Wold on strategies for maybe replacement and talking to the manufacturer as well. There've been kind of an uptick in Oak Street lift station complaints related to smells coming from it, so we have the public services and engineering teams looking at that and hopefully coming up with some options. We reached out to some folks asking if there's certain times a day, lengths. Just kind of the more information we can get, the better. There's a lot of flow that goes through that station, and so understanding what people are noticing and when they're noticing it is helpful. And then finally, I sent a note out to this, but Brenda and Lynn are working on the possibility of looking at some new software and technology related to recordings and live streaming. We have used Granicus for maybe 10 years or so, and as you know, we've had some repeated software failures or technology failures. It has become unreliable, and I don't know if it's fortuitous, but their contract is up with them at the end of June. We actually have the city of Chaska who uses YouTube for some of their video play. There's some background stuff or back to the house kind of stuff that we need to consider, but just wanted to let you know, and residents who might have been having problems with viewing meetings, that we agree it's an issue and that we're working on some strategies to correct that going forward. So.
That was 6:51. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, but very well done.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
By Councilmember Frischman, second by Councilmember Welch. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same